If your location is successful, it's your fault. If your location fails, it's your fault. No matter what, it's the leader's fault.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today I have a very special guest on the podcast. If cross-selling, bringing different trade lines into your business, multiple locations are all things that you may have thought about in the past or maybe contemplating even today, my guest today has experience in all those things. I met him, it's probably been a couple of months ago through a mutual friend. And we've kind of chatted here and there about different things and thought it would be good to bring him on the podcast to allow him to share his story. And I'm sure that you listeners will gather a number of different kind of golden nuggets that we've talked about or that he's experienced while trying to grow his business. So without further ado, would like to welcome my friend Lee Downing to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Lee.
Thank you, Chad. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to have you, especially with some of our conversations that we've had more recently that I think are super relevant right now as we navigate towards the end of 24, really start planning for 25 and continuing to grow our businesses. So, Lee, why don't you give the listeners a little bit of your background? As we talked before we jumped on, it was a little bit difficult for me as I was thinking about how do I introduce him? And I was like, well, I'll just let him introduce himself and kind of give your story so we have kind of a frame of reference as we chat.
Yeah, Chad, I'd be glad to. And thank you. Like I said, thanks for having me. So in 2012, y'all might remember there was a company called the Dwyer Group. They were on the Undercover Boss episode in Memphis as grounds guys. And so I love business. I'm not a big TV watcher, but loved the business. Got a call from the franchise, was offered a HVAC franchise because that's what I'd been doing my whole life was heating and air. And so I bought my first franchise in 2013, which was the Air Serv Heating and Air franchise. And then I always wanted to do all home services. I was actually a maintenance man at a hospital for 9 years. That was my very first job. And so I was kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none. And so I've always had this desire to do everything in the home. And so we ran the Air Serv. We added 4 locations for Air Serv. And then I was thinking like, well, how could I get more leads and not pay Google? And so I had all these customers asking me like, who cleans houses, who does glass, who does mirrors? And so I just started buying neighborly franchises. I bought a Glass Doctor franchise. I bought a Molly Maid franchise. We also bought the 5-Star Painting franchise. And then we opened up 4 more Air Servs. And so we have a total of 12 franchises. And what I say is, all the businesses are the same. They just have a different product. You know, Molly Maid has a cleaning product. We have HVAC product, heating and air products. And so to me, I love the challenge of running these different businesses. Then they do have different things. But, you know, another challenge for me is I grew up very poor and love helping people. And some people's like, well, you're never going to be able to relate to certain employees in certain businesses. And, you know, for me, that's not been the case. It's been very humbling and absolutely love it. So I think it's a great opportunity, and it is normal for HVAC, plumbing, electrical to be together. It's not typically normal for glass, cleaning, painting, and HVAC to be together, but it's working well for us, and so we're super excited about the future.
That's awesome. No, I think that gives people kind of a frame of reference. I guess from your perspective, what interests you, and I think we've talked about this before, but like, what was interesting about the franchise model? You know, you said you'd been doing it. What was kind of the appealing part of that kind of way to get into kind of the trades and the different businesses?
Well, for me, it's more personal thing. So I like to be a part of a group. I'm a family person, so I like. Some people are like, they blame me of having my pack, if you will, and they're like, oh, Lee has to have his people, and so I like that, the support of that. The franchise owner group is more powerful than anything about the franchise. I'm also a visionary. When somebody says how much revenue do you want to do, I say like a couple billion. I mean, why not? And I needed some structure. I needed somebody that would hold me accountable because I was only 24 years old when I bought my first franchise. And, I needed that franchise coach that says, hey, Lee, don't go fishing. You need to run your business. I didn't have a lot of that problem, but, I needed that structure and the systems. And, I will say that we have grown very quickly with Neighborly. Probably, I guess, maybe the fastest and largest franchise that they have that's, privately held. And we've outgrown the franchise in some aspects, but the way I believe is the more you give into something, the more you get out of it. And so I've really enjoyed growing with Neighborly. I did get to know Dina Dwyer Owens, the founder's daughter, very well. And I love the family side of it and the code of values that Neighborly have. But from a franchise only standpoint, no matter if it's, one of the other ones or us, it's just a structure that I needed to kind of keep me in line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I think that, as we're growing businesses, I think we find areas where we need more structure that maybe we haven't thought about, or, you just didn't know what you didn't know. What would you say are some of those like key learnings that you took away? Maybe not like early on, but like here, like over the last, call it 3 or 4 years. I know we talked about you bringing on a CFO. What are some of those things that you've noticed as you've kind of scaled as like, oh shoot, that's totally different than when I was small. Now I'm bigger, and this is the way that I look at it. I get that question a lot of like, what were you thinking at 5 million, at 10, at 15, at 20? What are some of those things that you would take away that you said you've learned like, oh wow, light bulb went off like in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I would say that knowing when to add key people, they do have a playbook, right? So they have a org chart for a 1 to 3 million, 3 to 5, 5 to 10. And so that's been nice to have. And then another thing is that looking back, because everybody can find problems with anything, right? And that's what most people want to do is like blame the franchise, blame them for everything. But looking back now, the ability for me to pick up the phone and call my franchise coach and say, hey, I'm at 3 million. Who's at 5 million? Let me call them. And so being able to talk to people that are at different levels and having that open network. Also, too, you mentioned the CFO role. The franchise did come in. They do like, we used to call them peer group meetings, or focus group meetings where they'll come in and they'll say, okay, hey, here we're planning for the future. These are the positions you're going to have to add. And then also, too, from a marketing standpoint and some other things is we kind of have the leading edge. I remember when LSAs come out, Neighborly knew about it before most anybody. I mean, yeah, the big shops probably knew about it because they have direct contacts to Google. But for a $1 million HVAC company or a $1 million cleaning company, we'd have never knew that. But Neighborly's like, hey, there's this new product called LSA. Get signed up before anybody else. And I mean, Chad, you probably remember that where we got all the leads for 60 days, 90 days. It was very interesting. And so there's been a lot of things that the franchise has exposed us to that we would have never been exposed to as a $1.35 million shop. Now, in the last year to 2 years, you have, certain events, home show events and stuff that people are going to now more than ever. But Neighborly's had that all these years. We've been having, the Neighborly reunion for, 30 plus years, whereas there's a lot of events, like Home Service Freedom and different things that started up in the last 3 to 5 years because people like yourselves have invested so much into the industry to help others to get there faster. And we have to move quickly now. I mean, things have to pivot and they're always changing. So these events have been good. We're blessed just to have our own network of owners. We have 5,500 owners. You put 5,500 home service owners in the room, you get a lot out of it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. One of the questions I have that kind of I think is pertinent for listeners, because I feel like today, I just got back from Service Titans Pantheon. I just got back from Home Service Freedom, Tommy's event. And I would tell you that it's amazing to kind of walk through like where all the vendors and just to see like how fast that group of people has changed. Like every other booth is some AI solution, some this, that, or the other. And I feel a lot older walking through those things because I think everybody at those companies is under the age of 25. But how have you worked? Obviously, with having kind of Neighborly as kind of the backing, they're going to bring a lot of shiny objects potentially to a lot of people. How have you kind of within your business kind of navigated that shiny object syndrome? We're as guilty of it as anybody. It's like you see something, it's like, whoa, yeah, we can do this. Like, this will be great. And then you end up with 4 shiny objects that are like 20% baked and you're paying for all this stuff and you don't even know why. It just sounded like a good idea. I think I have that problem as a visionary, and it's taken bringing other people in who are maybe not, that's not their first skill set. It's more questioning and like asking, is this worth it? And which I think it provides a good balance. How have you kind of navigated that? What I feel like in the last couple of years has just been on rocket fuel as far as the new ideas and solutions that have been brought to the table.
Yeah, so I'm probably a lot more like you. If I see something, I want to try it. I mean, we, in the last 3 months, or maybe I'd say 6 months, we've had a, Rilla online store, ambassador program for referral. I mean, literally anything anybody hits me with, I'm like, I can do it. XOI, and we try to do a good job, but I found myself doing too much. But my great aunt always told me, she said, son, you got to quit half-assing everything and start whole-assing something. And so, the thing was, Neighborly does vet our vendors for us, and that from a legal standpoint, and that has been very nice, because if they hadn't done more work on their side, I'd probably have a whole lot more I was trying to do. And quite frankly, if you try to implement too many things, you end up just losing money, and you're not successful. And so with the CFO, having a leadership team, we now take this to the team and say, okay, hey, what are the 1 or 2 things we could do and do them really well? And let's pause these other projects. But, I heard people like yourself and Tommy and Paul Kelly and all these guys would say, hey, man, quit trying to do 80 things and just do 2 really well. But I mean, when you have a visionary like myself and, drives the business, we want to do everything. We're super excited. And so it has been nice, having the franchise to kind of support us. And another thing, they try to use different levels of businesses. So they'll say, hey, let's test this in a 3 million. Let's test this in a 5. Let's test this in a 20. That's been nice too, because you can typically see how the results come out depending on how big the company is. A company like myself, 12 locations across 4 states, 245 employees. It's a lot harder for me to implement something than a company that's got 20 people in one location, where the owner's in their face every single day saying, hey, do this for me. It's much different. And so it's interesting to see how implementation of a product is depending on how the company is sized and laid out. But it's been nice having the franchise lead it,
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. As we got bigger, you feel like as a visionary, you feel more comfortable because it's like, oh, I got all these people and we can deploy all this stuff. But I think that, to your point, the rollout, because ultimately a lot of the shiny object stuff, it affects the front line. And to me, no one likes change. But again, I think we always have to compartmentalize change. We're asking them to be a great technician, and then we're throwing 18 other things at them to where it's like, well, this is just easy, right? Like, you just click the button and it's like, well, yeah, but like, I got to process that. I got to figure it out. And all the while I'm trying to fix the damn water heater. Like, that's what you asked me to do. That's what you pay me to do. And so I think we're very conscious about change and, okay, we got these 5 things that we could implement in the business. How big of an impact are they going to have on the front lines? Because that's where the bulk of our, employee population is. And can we roll out this change effectively? Or if we roll it out half-ass, are we just going to create a lot of disruption where it doesn't need to be? Like, can we get the same thing? And I think too, one of the kind of the pieces that I've kind of looked at is like, we think every change is going to result in this like great ROI. But I always look back and it's like, well, what are the things that we're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis that could increase ROI as well? And we should be focused on that already. Well, implementing a new thing is only going to draw our focus away from kind of those core KPIs that we're looking to monitor, and how do we increase those? I guess to that point, what are those things like within your business? And obviously with a bunch of different trades, they look different, everywhere. But like, what are those things in your business that you would say have been key that you've monitored from like a KPI perspective? And feel free just to take one trade and say, hey, this is really what we focus on in HVAC or plumbing or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so I'm a big basics guy, and I think it starts with everything from the uniform. It starts, a lot of people don't even think about the uniform being a KPI. I was a technician, and so I 100% agree with your statement about we asked this person to be a great technician. Of course, we have to make money. It's not actually a bad thing to make money. I mean, you have to make money to serve the communities that you're in. But so many people try to overcomplicate this, and it simply starts with the power of consistency. And then there's also a book called Ridiculously Easy to Do Business With. That's for our internal customer and our external customer. And so we ask these employees to go out here and do this stuff. And then you have a visionary in the background. It's like, hey, do RILA, do XOI, do a yard sign, do a Google review. And it's the next thing you know, these people start to have PTSD about this stuff. And so I think for me, if we can't get the wearing the uniform right, and we even wear, Chad, I even take it to the next level, like all of my team has to wear the same color every day. So the leadership team has to wear red on Mondays. We have a certain color for every day. And I think that stuff is very, very important. And those are the first KPIs. If you can't wear the uniform right and you can't follow that structure, you're definitely not going to do the difficult things out in the field, right? Ask the customer for, would you like to apply for convenient payment options? You're never going to ask that if you can't even wear your uniform right. We wear badges. A lot of companies don't. So I would say those KPIs. And then, the industry has a lot of other KPIs that you can focus on, closing percentage, average ticket, and all that stuff. But what I have found talking to many contractors, it depends on how you measure that stuff, right? And so you'll ask somebody, you'll say, hey, what's your average ticket? And they're like $25,000. But what they don't tell you is that's of sold jobs. Well, what is your average? What is your dollars per lead of every job you're in? So the language, people think that we all speak the same language. We don't, because, my booking rate is very high. Tommy come to my shop, Brigham come to my shop. We do have a very high booking rate. And I think they thought maybe, it's because they're dismissing so many leads. And that's not the case. Like if you call in to pay your bill and you ask about the generator service we now offer, we count that as an opportunity, where some people would say, hey, you shouldn't count that because they were trying to pay their bill. You're being too hard on your people. But I think that, you have to decide what KPIs are important to you. Use the industry standard KPIs, but I think it goes right back to the very beginning, the basic KPIs. Is your boots the right color? Is your belt on? Is your shirt tucked in? Is, all those KPIs. Is your van clean? Because if you don't start your day off like that, you're not going to be successful in any other way. And that's across all of my companies. That is not just HVAC. That's not just glass. It is across all of my companies. The locations that are dressed the best, the guys that are posting in their group meets on the weekends of them washing their vans, those are the locations that are doing the best.
Yeah, that is really great points. There's a lot to unpack there. I think one of the things that I definitely want to point out is what you said about how you measure KPIs. If you think that, you call somebody and you're like, oh God, our average ticket's way off. Again, to your point, ask how they calculate that. We even had the problem within our own organization where people, you'd ask a manager what your average ticket is, and he's giving me average sale and thinking he's doing a great job, but really, and so we basically built out an entire data dictionary. This is how everything is calculated, to the point where we had to actually extract data out of Service Titan, put it into Power BI, and cut it exactly how we wanted it cut so that everybody was looking at the same thing. And so I think that's hugely important within any business, is to be speaking the same language, because what you call average ticket, I may call average sale. What you call booking rate may be something completely different. And I think it's just important as you kind of measure up against others, and even internally, your service manager on the plumbing side may think he's knocking it out of the park, and you're looking at a different number going, what are you talking about, dude? And so I think that's extremely important. And then to your point of just the basics, right? It's, is your van washed? Is your uniform good? Because all of these things are what set us up for success. What did John Wooden, first thing that he taught all of his basketball players, and he had the best basketball players on the planet at the time. He taught them how to tie their shoes properly. Like, you're going to go to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and teach him how to tie his shoes. Like, what are we even talking about? But he knew all of those principles added up to success down the road.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, he even talked about putting your socks on right, and I mean, it's the basic things that make the biggest impact. And, I remember asking a couple contractors, how do you pay your staff? That's a big deal in the industry, right? We would all love to just say, oh, we just do commissions. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. And I had one person tell me, oh, I pay everybody 20%. It's very simple math. It's 20%. And I'm like, how do you pay the guy 20% to sell it, but then you pay somebody else to go out and perform the work? You're going to be over 20%, which is the industry KPI for labor. And then when you ask that clarifying questions, there's all these rules that come with it. Oh, well, if this happens, this happens. So, I would say to the listeners too is listen. We have a code of value, listening with the intent to understand what's being said, and what's being said is important to the speaker. I would be very careful when you ask questions with the answers. I would definitely do some follow-up questions, because I've made those mistakes. Like, I had a guy tell me one time, he's like, oh, we pay our HCVs 12%. I go back, I'm like, man, I'm paying my HCVs 12%. This is going to be great. I didn't think about, well, what about the mismeasures? What about they used the wrong financing? They gave too much discount. So you can't change the rules in the middle of the game either. So you have to wait to another end of a quarter, end of a year to say, hey guys, I made a mistake. This is the way the pay plan is supposed to be. And that's one thing that's got us, Chad, on when I taught you about profitable growth. Those are the things that everybody wants it to be easy, and they just want to set it and forget it. Look, man, if it was easy, everybody would be a business owner, and it's not easy, and you have to manage the process. I think with AI and Service Titan, things will get easier for us if we use our systems. But the job is, you have to still manage the process. And I have so many people in my organization that started with me, and as we grew, they become managers. And they thought, well, I'm going to have this job just sitting in an office. It's going to be so great. I have nothing to do. I'm just watching people. Oh, no. Management's difficult, right? You have to job cost every job. You have to cut people's commission when they sell it wrong, whatever. And what I've learned is the employees actually appreciate the accountability. A lot of people are scared to have that conversation. Hey, Chad, you undersold that job. I'm going to have to cut your commission 3% so we can make margins so the company can be profitable. We can still serve the communities that we're in. The employees actually appreciate that. So I would say that too is use the KPIs, but you also have to use common sense and explain why. This is our checker and this is how we use it for business. And so it's a very fine line in how you use that, if it's going to be a negative impact or a positive impact on your organization.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would add, which I think you're saying, I just want to further emphasize it, is, accountability. Yeah, it does come with like a negative, kind of vibe to it. And I think that what I've learned is that accountability is only as good as the help that you provide to that person that you're holding accountable. Once they know that you're there to help them, like the accountability, a KPI of a close rate is just as much a manager KPI as it is a technician KPI. Because if your technician isn't hitting that conversion rate, well, what are you doing to help them? Like, just simply bring them in and saying, hey, you're not hitting the KPI, do better. Well, what kind of manager are you? And I think that's where there's a lot of learning and why management is so much different than the individual contributor role. Because as an individual contributor, you can go try things, you can figure it out, you can, do whatever it may be to try to increase that. Well, as a manager, you've got to work through that individual contributor. So I think where we have fallen short and are looking to improve is how do we train these managers to manage effectively? Because to your point, where do a lot of them come from? In the trades, a lot of them come from the field, because you got to have some technical aptitude to a certain degree and kind of understand the work and all of that, and provide support to the guys from a technical side. But then also, how are we coaching? And so that's a big key for us is really training up those managers. I guess a question for you is what have you found to be successful in really getting those managers leveled up so that they can then influence the KPIs that, they're not allowed to go and do the work anymore? I always tell our managers that, hey, you were a great technician. However, We just basically, we took all of the business that you generated and we're willing to put that on the sidelines because we think you can impact 20 technicians rather than just one.
Yeah, so I have fallen guilty of Peter's principle too many times, and that's where you take a technician that's great and then you make them a manager because they earned it or they have time there with the company. And then typically what you do is you lose a great technician and a manager. That's what happens to me anyways. And so, what I would say is, when you take that person, one, they have to remain humble and they have to understand that leadership and management is servant. It's a servant role. Even in the Bible, it talks about it being a servant role. And, what I teach my team is they come to me and they're like, okay, this person's on the red list. I'm just going to fire them. And the first thing out of my mouth, because we have a code of values and one of them is looking to the system for correction and proposing all possible solutions if something is not working. And nothing hurts my heart more than anything when somebody doesn't expect it. I've never fired anybody. They fire themselves and they know it's coming because I took the time either after work, during work, or before work to sit down and say, hey, Chad, what's going on, man? Tell me what's going on. You would be surprised. Do you really think people want to do bad? No, people don't want to do bad typically. They want to be successful. And so if you coach them and mentor them through the process, and I've got a friend that works for one of our competitors, and I won't say his name, but I mean, this guy, when I first met him, was reading the book Lead Like Jesus. And that's exactly what we have to do is sit these guys down and show them that we truly care for them. And if they can't do this, what can we do to help either gift them back to the industry or put them in another seat on our bus? But what you can't do is wait till the day of, you've let them hang themselves and you walk in and say, hey, you can be the shop floor sweeper or you can go find you another job. That is not fair to that person. So what I highly recommend for my team is, and what has worked is, when they come to me and they want advice, the first question is, when's the last time you had dinner? When's the last time you had dinner with that person and his spouse or her spouse? Because I will tell you, I took an employee, which was my nephew, to dinner with his wife, and I just asked him some questions, and his wife looked at him and said, he could have been making all this money? I said, yeah, here's the technician income calculator right here. And with his KPIs, and here's the company standard KPIs. Had he met the company standard KPIs, this would have been his income, which was like $27,000 more for this time period. She looked at him and she said, sounds like it's your problem, not their problem after all. And so that's the thing is, it changed the trajectory of his entire career. And so that's what I tell my team is, you better know in your heart that you've done everything possible to change this person's life before you let them fire themselves. And so I think that, and Chad, to be honest with you, where does that go back to? The basics. What did your teacher do in kindergarten if you couldn't pass the test and she could identify that you needed more help with the spelling words than other people needed? She did one-on-one time with you and she helped you through it because guess what? Your success is her success. If she has a bunch of failing students, she's the problem. And I tell this in almost every meeting I'm in with my team. If your location is successful, it's your fault. If your location fails, it's your fault. No matter what, it's the leader's fault. And so that's the way I have, try to keep my team humble and say, hey, I don't want to hear he's not successful. If he's not successful, you should have found him something to do that he could be successful, because there again, nobody really wants to fail in life. It's a pretty miserable place to be when you feel like you're failing every single day. And I don't think there's any one human on this earth that wants to do that.
No, I would agree with you. I mean, no one shows up to do bad at their job, especially when the majority of your incentives are directed at, if you do a better job, you get rewarded. And not that everything's about money, but it does help pay bills and take families on vacations and buy new things and all of this. And, one of the things I always say, because we'll always get a lot of like, hey, I think we need to change the pay plan. Like, we need to pay them more money. And I'm like, all right, here's the deal. If I told your bottom technicians that I will pay them $10,000 today if they can convert at this percentage and this average ticket, I go, do you think they could do it? And typically the answer is, well, no, probably not. I go, well, then whose problem is that? It's not the incentive plan. It's the coaching that comes along with the incentive plan so that we can help make them more money. And so I love your analogy about school. Like, I've never really thought about that, but my daughter's in kindergarten now, and it's like, we had our parent teacher conference last week, and it's like, they can't let them fail. You can't, like, they have to move them to first grade. And, if you got someone that's struggling, well, what do? Well, I'm going to meet with the parents. I'm going to ask them to help. I'm going to, check in on things. I'm going to, like, keep pushing them forward. But I think sometimes we get stuck in this where, because they're in a career, well, you're going to be a plumber next year and the year after that and the year after that. So, like, maybe you're just a bad plumber. Whereas if we look at it as, no, all my guys this year, they need to be better in making more money next year than they made this year. How do I get them to do that? Which I think is an interesting way to think about it, from like, you can't let them fail, where so often we just let people fail and we put the blame on them. Well, they just don't get it. They just won't follow the process. It's like, now there are people, they may not follow the process and they may never buy in, and that's fine. But you've tried everything possible. You've had as many conversations. You've met with the wife. You've done all of the things that you could possibly do. And then at that point in time, yeah, hey, maybe this just isn't a fit. I know anytime that we have someone that leaves us, I send a message, because we get the email, I send a message to the manager. I say, hey, why'd this person leave? And luckily here lately, it's been, hey, we've tried everything possible. We've, sat down with this person. We've rode with them. We've brought them in. We've went over this, and they're just not buying into it. And I'm like, well, hey, I think we gave it as good of a shot as we possibly could in that particular instance. So I think that's so powerful. One of the things I have for you, and this is a curious one, because I know that we have, we've got 10 locations across the Midwest, but essentially doing, all three trades. So everybody's kind of doing the same thing. You've got locations, but different brands, different businesses, different stuff like that. How do you look at culture? Like, what is that to you? Is it a huge group? Do they have individual ones? Like, how do you manage that?
So I wear a bracelet on my wrist that says changing people's lives one day at a time. And when I walk into a room at any of my companies or locations, everybody runs up and hugs me, from the house cleaners to the HVAC technicians. I love my people, and I could get very emotional about this. If you don't know, I love to cry on stage. But my thing is culture is the most important thing, and I won't keep going back to the subject about paying people and people. This conversation we just had, but money is a byproduct. It has nothing to do with money. If employees are asking for raises, first off, they shouldn't have to ask for raises. We should pay our people what they're worth, by the way. But there's a culture problem. If people have to ask for raises, if people have to complain about the hours they're working, if people complain or you have to ask people to go work a home show, and then if they're going to be paid, there's a culture problem. And it starts with the leader. And culture is everything from, okay, Lee ran a service call. He didn't use the floor mat. He didn't put down shoe protectors, but he'll go into a meeting, do a TikTok about, if we don't do this, then we're going to get fired. That's not me. I walk it. I talk it. I do what I say I'm going to do. And I love my people. And I don't treat anybody differently. I mean, if you're good, bad, or indifferent, and that's one thing is, one of our code of values is everyone is right from their own perspective. A bad employee, like you just said, it may not be their fault. It may be our fault. We knew when we hired this person, they had no sales experience. We knew they had no HVAC license. So you want to hire this guy, in 30 days, you want to fire him because he don't know how to sell HVAC. You knew this up front. And so one thing we do too is we disc everybody now, and it helps us understand each other and what the strengths and weaknesses are going to be. So you take a Lee Downing, DI, and you ask me to go out and sell a unit, I'm going to sell the unit. Guess what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to measure the hole. I'm not going to get the financing paperwork done right. I'm not going to do the paperwork like I'm supposed to. So why be pissed off at me when you knew this when you hired me? Instead, you need to coach me and say, hey, buddy, I know you're going to do a really good job at the sale, but when you're out there, call me, because I'm going to tell you, use that XOI, use that RILA, use all these tools that God gave us to make sure we can make you successful, because we already have identified your weaknesses. That's a much better conversation than just always, getting on to me or beating me down because I didn't get the Google review or I didn't put out the yard sign. And all that's culture. Also, too, if you tell somebody you will pay them a certain amount and you don't clarify the rules and you realize the rules should have been put in place in the middle of the game, that's your fault, right? So one time I actually said, hey, anybody that gets this many Google reviews gets $1,000. Well, I was actually going to put them into a drawing and just draw one person out, but I didn't say the rest of the sentence. Yeah, well, I ended up paying everybody $1,000 because you cannot, no matter how hard it hurts you, you cannot change the rules on people. That's the number one way to kill culture. And then, love your people. You can look at my calendar anytime you want. It says, read the Bible, invest in self, and love your people. Every single morning is the first 3 things on my calendar. And when I say love the people, it's this simple. Pick 10 people, send them a text message. Don't make the mistake that I did when I was younger in the career and copy paste, because then they tell each other and they realize you just copy and paste. So now I learned that this is very intimate and it's very personal and it means a lot to me. So I text random people throughout the business. And that's been hard, Chad, for me to let go of because I have managers and I need people to be loyal to their managers. I need managers to treat people the way that I treat people. And that's been difficult for me, right? Because I have employees that I was managing when I started this business that were rock stars, and now they're not rock stars because of the people they report to. It clearly depends on the leader and the culture of that person. And people can see through the bullshit, man. I'm just being honest with you. There's no way to be fake at this. You have to have a servant heart and build a culture. And if you do, and then you do have economical headwinds like we are in right now, I think we are in the HVAC industry in economical headwinds. The industry is supposed to be down 11%. We're up 20. That's a 31% gap. That's what you get when you have a culture and you have an army of people that refuse to lose together. And so the people and culture is not, it's like growing a tomato with triple 15. It takes time. Now, if you want to grow crappy tomato, you put nitrogen on it, it'll crack before you get to cut it. And so you can't, culture is very, it's like SEO, right? It takes time to get a culture. It's not like LSA. You can't just flip a switch, turn on the nitrogen, and you got it. It takes time because people have to know if they trust you and if they can love you. And if they can't trust you, man, it means a lot. And I got employees that I don't even get to work with. I've never worked with these people in person that text me and says, hey, I just want you to know I love you. I mean, that's strong, man. When somebody tells you they love you, that's strong. And there is nothing wrong with that. And so I think culture is extremely, extremely important. And that is the only way we got to as big as we got, as fast as we got there, was the culture. Now, it has done a stress test on us, I will tell you that. We shouldn't have grown from where we did to where we did in the last 3 years. It's definitely been a stress test. But without the culture, we wouldn't have made it.
Yeah, I could not agree more with you. And I've said it multiple times on here. The biggest ingredient to success is caring about your people. Are those people willing to run through a wall for you? And I think that you pointed it out so eloquently. It is super, super simple, but you have to be patient. It's the same as if I want to lose weight. Well, I'm not going to lose all the weight that I want to lose in one day. It's going to take time and it's going to take consistency, and it's super simple. Walking for, a couple of miles a day. And if you did that and you did that all alone, you're probably going to see some results. And then you couple that with a few other things and a few other things and a few other things, and then all of a sudden you're starting to see the results. And I feel like people jump over this caring portion because it's like, well, this is business and you should hit your KPIs and do your things and all of that. And it's like, well, no one's going to want to hit any KPIs if they don't think you give a shit about them. And to me, that's the easiest part of it. I write a bunch of thank you notes. I do some text messaging, all of these things. And we're looking at how can we do even more of it? Because to you, or what you pointed out, as you grow, it becomes a little bit more difficult because you're across 4 states. So you don't see everybody every day and they don't see you. And so, trying to train these cultural champions that can give, even if it's not exactly what Lee can give to an employee because of where you sit on the bus and, the clout that you have, they've got to give some. And to me, that's what we always look for at our locations is, as a branch manager, your number one job and your number one KPI is retention. Can you keep your people happy? And you're going to lose people, and that's fine. We may have hired the wrong person or someone who didn't really buy in or whatever it may be, but like, are you working your ass off every single day to care more than they have ever been cared about before? Like, if you can do that, the success will happen. I'll train you on all the other stuff. What I can't train you on is how to care about people. Like, how you doing? What's going on? I'm really pumped for you. Great day yesterday. Let's make it 2 in a row. All of these things that I think we just get, as the business gets bigger, you start getting into what I call data hell, where all you're looking at is data. It's like, well, what does the data look like on the care side? Like, how many times have you reached out to your people? How many times have you rode with them? How many times have you talked to them? Like, all of these things that we don't necessarily, it's hard to measure, but hold yourself accountable. You know, my measurement is 4 thank yous notes a day. If I can do 4 a day, well, yeah, that's not going to make a massive impact today. But if I do that throughout the course of the year, my hope is that it'll hit a few people who that really meant a lot to, or maybe struggling, and that pepped them up. And also it bleeds down to the people that report to me of like, oh, well, if he's doing it, well, maybe I can do it too.
And use the technology, man. I mean, you can set up your ride-alongs on there. I do 3 to 5 a day. You know why I do those? It ain't to check on the guys. It's so I can comment and say, good job. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for telling the company story. Thank you for bragging on the culture of this company. Like, use technology. And I think some of the old school stuff is good. I think handwritten thank you cards should never go away. But if you do the RILA, it'll prompt you to do that. Man, I need to write this guy a thank you card. Oh, I need to write this customer a thank you card. And so, like, I think using the technology that we have is super, super important. And you know, people ask me all the time, they're like, Lee, how do you do this? And I prayed for a long time that God would give me more than I can handle. And I think he's got jokes now. But anyways, you know, it's, I just wake up every day and I'm like, I've got an army, no matter what happens. And Chad, I'll tell you this, I paid people $125,000 to run $1 million location. And I've paid people $50,000 to run $1 million locations. And the $50,000 guy did better than the guy making $125,000. And so it is not the money. It is 100% the culture and your heart and your servant. And my grandpa told me 2 things. He said, son, you live for 1 day, and that's when you're laying in the casket. What are people going to say about Lee Downing when they're standing there saying their goodbyes? And the other thing is, if you take a job, whatever you agree to work for, you agree to do whatever your boss tells you to do. It don't matter if it's sweeping the floor, taking out the trash. And that's one thing that I do when I go to a location is I will pile up trash in front of the door and see how many people will step over it. It's amazing. And then I'll go out there and clean it up. And they're like, oh no, Lee, you don't need to clean that up. I said, oh no, I'm going to clean it up because all 5 of y'all walked in here and stepped right over this. And by the way, I piled this up at 5 o'clock this morning. This was the stress test to see who you really are. And you know, my thing is, it's real simple. You walk out to a van, I don't need to disc you. I can tell you right now whether you should be here. And this old man told me one time, he said, you know how I interview people? And I said, no. And I'm thinking he's got some complicated process. You know, he knows everything. He said, when they walk in the door, I say, okay, let's go to lunch. He books every interview at lunchtime. And he said, well, they walk out. It's okay, where's your car? He said, oh no, we're going in your car. They get in their car. He takes them to lunch. And then he comes back. If they salted their food before he tastes it, they don't even get a chance to work at his company. He said, how can you salt something? How can you judge something when you haven't even tested it? But you salted your food before you even tasted it. He said, I would never hire somebody like that at my company. So there's all these basic, simple things. You know, I think Ken Goodrich talks about his dog, Sadie, the Sadie test, right? That's real. I mean, I had a black lab in my office for years until she bit somebody. And whenever she would come in, you would come in, she let me know real quickly if she liked you or not. Like you could tell clearly if she liked you. Sometimes we just overcomplicate this stuff, man. It's not that complicated.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think the one thing that I've learned over the course of really the last 2 years, I feel like, is just it's super simple. Like, it shouldn't be complicated. when it gets complicated is the day that you confuse everybody in the organization. No one knows, what are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish, when the mission should be super, super simple. But no, I can't thank you enough for kind of your insights. I love talking about this stuff. I just feel like what you're building and how you're building it is an example for a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people on what seems like daily basis at this point who are, how do I get to this level? How do I get to that level? And I'm like, it's simpler than you think. It's about the basics. Heck, we're looking at our numbers right now and I'm like, I think everybody right now is like, well, the marketing's the problem. The marketing's the problem. The marketing's the problem. And then I did some research over the weekend. I'm like, no, it really doesn't seem like the marketing is the problem. It's more so what we're doing with each of the leads that we have. And if we could do better with those leads, i.e. provide better customer service, gain more trust, show more value, we could do business with a lot more of these customers that we've already brought in. And I don't just have to go spend money hand over fist to do this. And I think that's what COVID got us into, is when leads are just flying in, you don't have to provide any value, build any trust, do whatever. You just get on to the next one. Well, now it's like, okay, well, here's where volume is. How are we going to maximize what we have? And there, your growth is right there. And as we were talking before, that's a hell of a lot more profitable growth than just double the marketing budget, spend more dollars, do all of these things. And so I think that's a critical piece. And, it starts with caring and then, lends itself right onto to all of the basic KPIs that we're all looking at.
Yeah, I definitely think we need to quit playing the volume game. We need to play the quality game and do more with less. We've started cutting our calls back to 2 to 3 a day because we ask our technicians to do so much. We need to build value. The homeowners have no problem paying for a world-class experience. If you don't think that's the case, tell me how Apple did it. Tell me how Chick-fil-A did it. It is a quality thing and it's a world-class experience. And, that's one thing we're saying is we're going to slow down. We're going to provide a world-class experience. We're going to get more for less. And our people are going to go home and be with their families this afternoon, which is extremely important because, when the husband or the wife goes home and spends quality time with their families, they come back and they provide a better experience for the next day for our employees. So running all these calls, asking our dispatchers to do call-by-call management when guys are running 6 to 8 calls a day, that is not the game. And it is so easy to fall into that trap. And COVID supercharged that. And it was more like the what I call the Dollar General police, like, oh, well, if you don't either pay me or either use me or you're going to wait 8 days to get somebody else out here. That mentality should have never happened, and it did. And so we've got to quickly pivot to hey, it's okay to run 2 calls a day. I'd rather run 2 calls a day, $4,000 in revenue, and then run 8 calls and get $4,000 in revenue. And it's just, this is unnecessary. So if you compare us back to 2019, before all that mess, I don't know that the leads are really down. So I think it's all in what you compare it to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think they've just normalized to what we should all expect. And so, I think that I do think there's some external factors that are playing into that make it easy to blame why that is. But I think if you look at the data, there was an influx in lead volume during 20, 21, 22. And now that lead volume has leveled out to what it was back in 18, 19, which at the end of the day, we shouldn't see really lead volume on a just a flat, if you're spending more on marketing, you should expect more leads. But if you just look at AHR data from people putting in new systems, a bunch of that volume was pulled up into those years. Now it's back to normal, which would tell me that because it got pulled up, it's actually more, or would have been more today than it was back in, call it 17, 18, 19. And so to me, it's just getting back to the basics and figuring out, how do we maximize this? I always tell our team, they called us out there for a reason. So we either didn't build enough trust, value, or conviction that we could fix the problem because they had an issue that they called us out for. So let's go ahead and take care of that issue.
Well, and we've ran more calls year to date than we have over the last 2 years. And it's because when we were in the storm, we stuck with the basic KPIs. We sold the memberships. We sold the indoor air quality. We sold the reoccurring services. And that's where a lot of people, they want what I call wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. That's not me. I like to plant seeds. I like to fertilize them. I like to have long-lasting relationships with my clients. So I'm not trying to get the most out of every one of my clients the day I go there. We call it flips or you convert to sales or whatever. But these people that are bragging about flipping 60 to 70% of their leads over to the sales department to replacements, that's going to catch up with you. That too high of numbers is also bad, right? And so that's why the industry has KPIs. And so when a guy's flipping 70, 80%, two things. Either he's getting only opportunities, and yes, his KPI should be that high, or he's doing something unethical. And so you have to watch for that. And a lot of people want to brag about those numbers. And the people that are listening, they're asking like, hey, how do I get to 5 million? Be careful listening to that, because you may not have enough of great leads to flip 70%. And sell your memberships. Man, it's so important. And you got all this new stuff out with all this technology. Like, you need to have memberships. And, a lot of people's like, well, my customers don't want to buy them. That's a lie. People want to buy them. I mean, if people will pay for a gym membership for 3 years and not use it, they'll pay for an HVAC tune-up membership plan that we're going to make them use it. So don't give me the BS. Customers actually appreciate, they're so excited. And, another thing too, Chad, is some of these people, their service providers are the only people they may see for every 6 months. Some of these people don't have families. They don't have kids. There's a bigger purpose. And, I just remind all these service professionals is don't miss the opportunities that God puts in front of you every day. Because sometimes it's just the test. And I think it's very, very important to not miss that. And so, I agree. It's very simple. It's not that complicated. We make it complicated.
Absolutely. Well, Lee, I really appreciate the time, man. As always, it's a lot of fun talking with you. I know that this episode, I'm hopeful, will be really impactful. Thanks for sharing your message. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Chad. I appreciate it, and appreciate all you've done for me, and appreciate what you give back to the industry. It's awesome.
Again, I can't thank you guys enough for listening. And, I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you want to keep listening. Leave us a review if you like today's episode. And most importantly, remember, growth is a journey, and it's all about taking small steps forward each and every day. Keep pushing yourself, embracing new challenges, and never stop striving for progress. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and remember, you can't stop the growth. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to get connected, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. As always, keep growing out there.